I think that there are a lot of challenges and opportunities facing mobile apps. I think the biggest opportunity and challenge, because they're really combined, is that there's such a high demand for mobile applications. 3.5 years ago, when we started our company, which was then acquired by Blackboard, mobile apps were very new. We were taking a big risk. We said, hey, let's build an application for our university, Stanford. And everyone was like, well, we should wait, maybe we make a website, we don't need to make an app for it right now. That's not what the conversation is like right now. Everyone, at least in the US, we find that universities understand we need to have a mobile application. And the reason for that is because students are coming to campus with an iPhone, with an Android, with whatever they might have, and they all use apps. They're using ESPN, they're checking their sports scores, they're getting email, they're interacting with games. They're doing basically everything on their smartphones, and they expect to be able to interact with their university too. And so the biggest challenge for universities is meeting that expectation. Because if you don't, then you're going to have frustrated students. Students who are like, why do I do all these things on my phone, but I can't get my grades, get my homework, get my discussions, see where the building is on campus, find out how to take the bus to my course. It's a huge expectation that needs to be fulfilled, I think. So that's what we spend our time doing. I'd say that one trend is that just the standard of excellence that users expect is a lot higher now. And I think the reason for that is over the last 3, 4, 5 years, the quality of applications that are being created on these devices is increasing phenomenally. I mean, big companies, small companies, they're investing a lot in their mobile experience. They're understanding that when you create a product, you actually have to think about mobile first. And what that means is you end up having experiences that are really well designed. And users tend to use experiences that are very well designed. So that means that when they come to the university, they're expecting not just an application, not just a mobile experience, but a really well designed mobile experience. And that's a trend that I think is really attributed towards all the companies that are doing really good mobile development out there. The first observation I'd say we've noticed is that the adoption of smartphones, the sort of percentage of adoption of smartphones tends to vary by country to country, and it's very staggered. So, for example, in the US and in particular on the West Coast, the adoption of smartphones was very rapid. Probably has something to do with the fact that I went to university 10 miles away from the headquarters of Apple Computer and Google. So that explains, I think, why smartphones really became very popular, and the usage of them, both on campus, outside of the classroom, was dramatically higher on the West Coast than it was on the East Coast, and in the US before it was internationally. So that's certainly one difference that we've noticed. That I wouldn't say it's changed our approach to development, because I think at the end of the day, a user in Germany who's trying to access his or her courses tends to need the same sort of things as a student in the US who's trying to access their courses at a fundamental level. There are some specific differences, obviously, but they're not so fundamental that they're really worth talking about. We obviously spend a lot of time localizing and translating our applications, and there's some cultural differences that you have to approach naming and certain conventions differently. But mostly what's interesting is just the usage of these devices is different from country to country. In New Zealand, data plans for your iPhone are really expensive. Like, no one has them. And so the appetite for mobile applications is a little bit different there than it is in the US, where data plans are simple to come by. Financial difficulty is something that we see from time to time, of course, and I think we first and foremost we try and position our products to be fairly valued. And what I mean by that is, if you're an institution and you didn't want to work with a vendor, there's still options available to you, obviously. You can go hire developers, you can go work with students to develop something on campus, and there's a natural cost associated with that. We try and position our product to be very, very fairly priced so that it's more cost effective to work with a vendor like Blackboard than it is to hire an iPhone developer, an Android developer, a web developer, and a designer to do all of that. But at the same time, we still see customers who say, listen, we want this, but we don't have the resources to invest in that right now. And so we try and make that work, and sometimes it does, and sometimes it doesn't. And I think that, so that's sort of one reality of the situation. With our other, with one of our products, which is called Blackboard Mobile Learn, we actually provide some pricing options too. So like many of our Blackboard products, a university can actually pay for the product. It's a license cost, they pay for it yearly. But we also provide another option, which is if the university doesn't want to pay for the product, we can deploy the product at no cost for the university, and students can choose if they want to pay for the software themselves. So just like you go to the App Store and you pay $2.99 for Angry Birds, you could pay $1.99 to use Blackboard every year. Some universities decide to do that, some universities don't. It's really an option that they have, but it's one of the ways in which a customer can say, listen, we really want this, we don't have the resources to invest in it right now, so we'll allow students to choose, and maybe they decide that it's worth it to them to pay $1.99 to access Blackboard from their phone, or maybe they decide it's not, but the option is there. We have encountered, I don't know if I would call it resistance, but we've definitely encountered resistance at times with educators, in particular because we found that the adoption of technology in general tends to be, and not always the case, but tends to be different between students and instructors. And I think that's just it's a reality that young people and students tend to be on the leading edge of technology. Again, generalizing here, but when that happens, you have a group of students who have the newest phones, who use the newest apps, who expect the latest and greatest, and their expectations are different than teachers. And if a teacher doesn't have an iPhone or an Android or a smartphone for that matter, he or she is by definition less inclined to really think much about what you can do with those devices inside the classroom and what students expect to do with those devices inside and outside the classroom. And so that's not a systematic, fundamental problem that we have, but it's still interesting because a lot of the things that we do, a lot of the development that we do, and a lot of the ideas that we have because we think like students. It's who we are, it's how we approach this problem. Not everyone does, but when you do that, that is sort of a natural barrier you see sometimes when the instructors, the educators, the folks at the institution who are making purchasing decisions, they're not students. So they're not necessarily living and breathing how students are living and breathing the technology. So that creates an interesting barrier sometimes. But it's something that we do our job, which is to evangelize the student perspective. We talk about what students expect, what students do, what students want. And sometimes, educators find that interesting, and sometimes they might disagree, but mostly we have really good conversations about it, whether they end up working with us as a vendor or not. That's what we like to do. We like to think about what students enjoy and what they expect. I think one of the facets of our company, of Blackboard, that educators find most useful is that we stay true to our mission, which is helping universities and helping educators leverage the latest and greatest of technology. Being on the leading edge of technology is not easy. It's something that we try to do. I think we do it well a lot of times, but it's something that's very hard. I mean, even as mobile developers, keeping track of the newest devices, of the newest APIs, of the newest paradigms in software development, it takes a lot of work. What we try and do is alleviate the burden of doing that from educators, because educators teach. They're doing their best to stay on the leading edge of teaching. What we try and do is really leverage technology in an interesting way to allow teachers to do their jobs even better and in more interesting ways, and allow students to learn in more interesting ways. And I think what's interesting about that is that it's a partnership that educators can form with companies like Blackboard to do that, because it takes a village, right? It's, if you have a group of mobile developers like Blackboard Mobile spending their time really passionate, waking up, going to bed every night, thinking about how to leverage technology, and you combine that with the expertise of teaching and the passion for teaching, I think you can do something that is more powerful than the sum of its parts. And that's what I think our customers find valuable. I think students are refreshed every time something that they use every day becomes available on the devices that they use every day. And for the longest time, and still today in many places, that just hasn't been true. I know this because I started my company out of frustration. All of the technology services that I used as a student at Stanford sucked. I didn't like them. They didn't work the way I wanted, they didn't work on the devices that I was using, and they didn't look very good. And that was frustrating, and I think it's frustrating for a lot of students when they compare their student services to the other things that they use. They're comparing it to Twitter and Facebook and Google and all these things that look really nice on mobile devices and work really great. So I think what students appreciate, not just about Blackboard, but about any company that does this well, is how to craft an experience that's really elegant and no more complicated than it needs to be. It should be simple. And students aren't always impressed by Blackboard. It's something that we've had to work to do that over time, because Blackboard is something that students use every day. And 3 years ago there was no app that let you use Blackboard, but it's something that we worked really hard to create, and I think students are refreshed and impressed every time we do something new, but I'm sure they still expect even more. So I think it's a good relationship in that sense, because they push us. They say, well, I love this stuff, but I also want these other things, and so it's a good feedback loop that allows us to, I think, do good work over time. What I plan to talk about is honestly what I think is interesting in mobile right now. I'm not the expert, but I spend a lot of time thinking about mobile as a student, as a developer, as someone who runs a business that very much does this. And I think there's a lot of interesting things going on that the industry should recognize. And it's not just about education, it's how people use mobile devices in other industries as well, about healthcare, about hospitality industry, about education, gaming, and because we spend a lot of time in San Francisco using our phones and observing the industry, I'm kind of interested in sharing my observations and hoping to learn from others too who do this, what their observations are. So my keynote's going to be about those observations that I find most interesting about mobile, what sort of industries mobile has already disrupted, and what other things could happen over time with mobile. What's really impressive to me about the conference so far is the delegates from all around the world. It's rare, for me at least, to go to a conference where there are so many different people from so many different countries. Go to a conference in the US, there's lots of Americans, which is great, and then very few people from different countries, but it's really great walking from table to table, from booth to booth, and hearing different languages, seeing different people who have different experiences, different perspectives on things, and I think it makes for great conversation, and it's nice to have an organization and an event that really tries to breed that as much as possible.